I've told 3 people about this. 2 of them stopped talking to me. The third, my former station partner, Elise, she just sent me a single text that said, "I know. Please don't call me again." So I'm telling you. I was a hydroacoustic monitoring technician for 9 years. That's not a classified title. You can find it on government job boards if you look. What you won't find is any mention of Station 14C, because as of February 2019, it doesn't appear on the CTBTO's publicly listed network. It was never formally decommissioned. It just stopped being mentioned. The station sat on Irawa, a volcanic spit in the Central Pacific, maybe 400 meters across at its widest point. Not a real island by most definitions. More of a geological accident that stayed above sea level long enough for someone to bolt a building to it. The facility was small, a receiving house, a generator shed, a single dormitory with 4 bunks, and 68 kilometers of undersea cable running to a set of 3 hydrophones suspended in the Sofar Channel at about 900 meters depth. We listened to the ocean. That's all we did. We listened. Our job was to record, categorize, and flag anomalous acoustic events for relay to the International Data Center in Vienna. Most of what we heard was exactly what you'd expect. Whale song. Seismic rumble. Ship noise. Ice calving from thousands of miles away. The deep sound channel carries everything. Frequencies below 200 Hz can travel across entire ocean basins without significant loss. A volcanic eruption in the Indian Ocean registers on our equipment as clearly as a car radio playing in your driveway. You get used to it. The ocean is not quiet. It's layered, constant, and immense in its noise. But it's learnable. After 2 years, I could look at a spectrogram and tell you the difference between a bulk freighter and a tanker at 6,000 kilometers. After 5, I could hear the rhythm of the Southern Ocean's thermal cycles the way you'd recognize a song you grew up with. I'm telling you this because you need to understand, when I say something was wrong, I mean something was wrong in a way that only someone who has spent years memorizing the acoustic signature of the Pacific Ocean could notice. It started with what we called the dropout. February 4, 2018. 2:17 local time. I was alone on shift. Elise was asleep in the dormitory. Our third crew member, Vasquez, had rotated out 2 weeks earlier and hadn't been replaced yet. Budget delays, they told us. At 2:17, all 3 hydrophones recorded simultaneous silence. Not quiet. Silence. You need to understand the distinction. Quiet is when signal amplitude decreases. Silence is when there is no signal at all, a flat line. Zero pressure variation. In 900 meters of open ocean, this is not physically possible. Water is a medium. It transmits. Even in the most remote, dead calm patch of ocean on Earth, there is thermal noise, there is the faint pressure signature of currents, there is the deep geological heartbeat of the planet's crust. You will never, under any conditions, record absolute zero from a functioning hydrophone in open water. All 3 channels went to zero simultaneously for 11 seconds. Then everything came back. Normal ambient levels. Normal spectrographic profile. As if nothing had happened. I flagged it, logged it, and sent the report to Vienna. I assumed equipment malfunction, maybe a cable fault causing momentary signal loss. It happens. Rarely to all 3 simultaneously, but it happens. Vienna acknowledged receipt. No follow-up. 9 days later. February 13, 2:17. Same thing. 11 seconds of absolute silence. All 3 channels. Same time. Same duration. I flagged it again. This time I included a note about the timestamp coincidence. Vienna acknowledged. Still no follow-up. I told Elise. She pulled up both recordings and spent maybe 20 minutes examining them. Her conclusion was the same as mine initially: equipment fault. Probably a power fluctuation from the generator cycling, she said. The timing's weird but not impossible. Some kind of resonance in the supply current. I accepted that. I wanted to accept that. February 22nd. 2:17, 11 seconds. I was awake and watching when it happened this time. I'd set an alarm. The screens went flat. The audio feed, we always had one channel running through speakers for ambient monitoring, went dead. Not dead like unplugged. Dead like the room suddenly didn't have air in it. Like the concept of sound excused itself. Then it came back. Exactly 11 seconds. This time, when I reviewed the recording, I noticed something I'd missed before. In the final half-second before the dropout, in the last 500 milliseconds of recorded signal before zero, there was a frequency spike. Brief. Narrowband. Centered at 52 Hz. 52 Hz. If you know anything about ocean acoustics, that number might ring a bell. It's the frequency of the so-called 52 Hz whale, a hypothetical animal detected in the 1980s and 90s that vocalized at a frequency unlike any known whale species. It was called the loneliest whale in the world because its calls were at a frequency no other whale would respond to. The popular science press loved it. But that's not what this was. The signal I was looking at wasn't biological. It had no harmonic structure. No modulation. No Doppler shift. It was a pure tone, mathematically perfect. A clean sine wave at exactly 52.000 Hz, lasting 500 milliseconds, and then nothing. I sent the detailed analysis to Vienna. This time I included spectrographic images, the frequency measurement, and the pattern data. 3 days later, I got a response. Not from my usual contact. The message came from an address I didn't recognize within the organization. It said, "Received. Continue monitoring. Do not discuss externally. Replacement crew arriving March 3rd. We weren't scheduled for crew rotation until April." Elise read the message over my shoulder. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Okay. So they know what it is. You think? They're not asking questions, Marcus. They're not confused. They already know." March 3rd. The crew arrived. But it wasn't a replacement crew. It was 4 people from a department I'd never heard of, technical signals evaluation, they called it. 3 men and a woman. They brought their own equipment in sealed cases and set it up in the receiving house without asking for our help or explaining what any of it was. One piece I recognized, a broadband transmitter. Powerful enough to send an active signal through the cable and out the hydrophone array. We'd never been equipped for active transmission. Our station was passive. Listen only. Elise and I were told we would continue normal monitoring duties but were to defer to the evaluation team on all protocol questions. We were not to include any data from our station in the regular reports to Vienna until further notice. They set up on a 12-hour rotation. 2 of them were always in the receiving house. The other two slept or sat outside on the rocks. None of them talked to us except to ask functional questions. Where's the freshwater tank? How do we reset the generator? That kind of thing. I asked the team leader, Dr. Renard. He said his name was what they were evaluating. Signal characteristics, he said. Routine assessment. Of what? He looked at me with what I can only describe as practiced disinterest. Of whatever your reports described, Mr. Home. On March 8th, at 2:17, the dropout happened again. 11 seconds. I was in the receiving house with two of Renard's team when it occurred. They didn't react. They just watched their instruments, made notes, and exchanged a look between them that carried more information than anything they'd said to me in 5 days. After the signal returned, one of them, I think his name was Caulfield, did something on their transmitter console. A series of keystrokes. Then he sat back and watched the spectrograph. Nothing happened. At 2:28, 11 minutes after the dropout, Caulfield transmitted something. I couldn't see what, the display was angled away from me, but I saw the power draw spike on the transmitter's gauge. He sent something into the water. A signal. Active. Directed down the cable and out the hydrophones at 900 meters. I said, "What are you sending?" Caulfield didn't answer. Renard, who had entered the room without my noticing, said, "Mr. Home, your shift ends in 40 minutes. Please continue your log." I completed my shift. I logged the dropout as usual. I went back to the dormitory. Elise was awake, sitting on her bunk with her laptop open. She turned it toward me. On the screen was a list she'd compiled, every dropout we'd recorded. Dates. Times. Duration. February 4th. 2:17, 11 seconds. February 13th. 2:17, 11 seconds. February 22nd. 2:17, 11 seconds. March 3rd. 2:17, 11 seconds. March 8th. 2:17, 11 seconds. Every 9 days, she said. Almost. February 4th to 13th is 9 days. 13th to 22nd is 9 days. 22nd to March 3rd is 9 days. 3rd to 8th is 5. It shortened. It shortened. After they arrived. She looked at me. They sent something, didn't they? Tonight. I heard the generator pull. Yes. Marcus. They're talking to it. I want to be precise about what happened over the next 2 weeks because the sequence matters. I kept my own log, handwritten, in a field notebook I'd been using since 2015. I still have it. I'm looking at it now. March 9th. No dropout. Nothing unusual. March 11th, 2:17. Dropout. 11 seconds. But this time, when the signal returned, the 52 Hz tone didn't appear at the beginning of the silence. It appeared at the end. In the first 500 milliseconds after the signal resumed. Like a punctuation mark. Like a reply. March 12th, Caulfield transmitted again. I wasn't in the room but I heard the generator spike at 2:28. Same interval. 11 minutes after the dropout. March 14th, 2:17. Dropout. 9 seconds this time, not 11. March 15th, 2:17. Dropout. 9 seconds. March 16, 2:17. Dropout. 7 seconds. Every night now. The interval between events had collapsed from 9 days to 1. And the duration was decreasing. March 17, 2:17. Dropout. 7 seconds. March 18, 2:17. Dropout. 5 seconds. They were transmitting every time now. I could hear it even from the dormitory, the generator cycling under the sudden draw. March 19. I confronted Renard directly. I stood in the doorway of the receiving house at 2 o'clock and said, "What is responding?" He was adjusting something on Caulfield's console. He didn't look up. Dr. Renard. I am the station operator. I have security clearance for everything that transits through this facility. What are you communicating with? He stopped. Straightened. Looked at me. Mr. Holm. Your clearance covers monitoring and reporting of passive acoustic events. What we are doing is not within that scope. You will continue your duties. In approximately 10 days, you and Ms. Duchamp will be rotated to your next assignment. What happens in 10 days? Your rotation. What happens here? That is not within your scope. I went back to the dormitory. Elise wasn't there. Her bunk was made. Her personal bag was gone from under it. Her laptop was gone. I checked the dock. We had a small concrete pier on the leeward side where the supply boat moored. The rigid inflatable we used for local maintenance was gone. Elise had left. No note. No message. At some point between midnight and 2 o'clock, she had packed her things and taken the boat. In the dark. On open Pacific water. The nearest inhabited island was Rarotonga, about 300 kilometers south-southeast. I tried her satellite phone. No answer. I tried the emergency channel. Nothing. I reported her absence to Renard. He said, "We're aware. She'll be picked up by the scheduled supply run." She took the inflatable. Alone. At night. She'll be fine, Mr. Holm. How do you know that? Because she's not in the water. She was collected at 1:40 by a vessel we have on standby. They had a boat out there. They'd had a boat out there this whole time. Elise had known. She'd arranged her own extraction and hadn't told me. I should have been angry. What I felt was something worse. I felt like the only person left in a room where everyone else had already heard the punchline. March 20th, 2:17. I was in the receiving house. Renard's team was there, all 4 of them, for the first time on the same shift. They were focused on the displays in a way I hadn't seen before. Not tense. Anticipatory. 2:17. The dropout lasted 3 seconds. When the signal returned, the 52 Hz tone was there. But it wasn't 500 milliseconds anymore. It held for 4 seconds. And it wasn't alone. There was a second tone beneath it. Lower. Much lower. Around 8 Hz, below the threshold of human hearing but visible on the spectrograph as a broad, smooth wave. 8 Hz. I knew that frequency. Everyone in this field knows it. 8 Hz is the fundamental resonant frequency of the Earth's Schumann cavity, the electromagnetic resonance between the planet's surface and the ionosphere. It has nothing to do with underwater acoustics. It shouldn't appear on a hydrophone. It's an atmospheric electromagnetic phenomenon. It does not propagate through water. But there it was. Clear as a bell on the spectrograph. A pure 8 Hz pressure wave in 900 meters of open ocean. Caulfield looked at Renard. Renard nodded. Caulfield transmitted. This time I could see the display. What he sent was not a simple tone. It was a structured sequence. Short pulses and long pulses. Not Morse, I know Morse. Something else. Something with a grammar I didn't recognize. When the transmission ended, there was no immediate response. Then, at 2:22, 5 minutes after the dropout, without any preceding silence, the hydrophones recorded something new. It built slowly. A pressure wave, very low amplitude, rising from the noise floor like a tide. Frequency, 52 Hz. But modulated. Pulsing. Shaped into something that, on the spectrograph, looked like. I don't want to say what it looked like. It looked like language. Not code. Not mathematical sequence. Not repeating patterns. It had the structural complexity, the non-repeating variation, the nested architecture of natural language. Phonemes. Morphemes. Syntax. Visible on a spectrograph the way speech is visible on a spectrograph, except at 52 Hz, in pressure waves, in 900 meters of water, coming from below the array. Below. Our hydrophones were at 900 meters. The signal was coming from beneath them. The Renard team recorded for 6 minutes. The signal continued, modulating, varying, structured. 6 minutes of what might have been speech in a frequency the human ear cannot process and from a source deeper than our equipment could localize. Then it stopped. At 2:28, Caulfield began transmitting again. And I realized, watching his hands, watching the display, that what he was sending was not original. He was sending back portions of what had just been received. Modified slightly. Rearranged. Like someone repeating a phrase back with different emphasis to check understanding. He was conducting a conversation. I stood there for another 10 minutes watching. No one told me to leave. No one acknowledged me. When Caulfield finished transmitting, Renard made a single note on a physical pad, paper, not digital, and the team began shutting down their supplementary equipment. Renard looked at me. Mr. Home. Your rotation has been moved up. A boat will arrive at 6 o'clock. Please have your personal effects ready. What is that? I said. What's down there? That question, Renard said, is not within your scope. It's talking. You're talking to something. Your boat arrives at 6 o'clock. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dormitory in the dark and listened to the ocean through the walls. You can always hear it on Irawa, the swell hitting the volcanic rock, the deep resonance of water against the island's submerged foundations. I'd slept to that sound for years. That night it sounded different. Not wrong. Not alien. But aware. Like the difference between a room where you're alone and a room where someone is standing quietly behind you. The sound was the same. The quality of being heard was new. At 4:30, I went back to the receiving house. The team was gone, sleeping, or on the rocks, I didn't know. The main monitoring system was still running. My system. The one I'd operated for years. I sat down and pulled up the recording from 2:22. The 6-minute signal. I ran it through our standard analysis tools, frequency breakdown, amplitude envelope, modulation patterns. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I time compressed it. Brought it up from 52 Hz into audible range. It's a standard technique, we use it for analyzing whale calls sometimes. You multiply the frequency to bring it within human hearing range and speed the playback correspondingly. I multiplied by 60. Brought it up to around 3100 Hz. The range of the human voice. And I listened. It was not a voice. I want to be clear about that. It did not sound like a person speaking. It did not sound like any animal I've ever heard. It did not sound like anything I can compare to anything else. But it had cadence. It had rhythm. It had what I can only describe as intentionality. It was not random. It was not mechanical. It was organized in the way that only a mind organizes sound, with pauses that felt like breath, with emphasis that felt like meaning, with variations that felt like the difference between a statement and a question. I listened to all 6 minutes of it. And at the end, in the final 4 seconds of the signal, the cadence changed. It slowed. The tonal quality shifted. And in those last 4 seconds, time compressed and frequency shifted into the range of human hearing. It did something that I have spent every day since trying to explain away. It said my name. Not in English. Not in any language. Not in phonemes that correspond to Marcus in any alphabet. But in the cadence, in the rhythmic signature, in the tonal emphasis, the same way you could tap someone's name on a table and they'd know it was them. The same way a mother recognizes her child's cry from across a crowded room. Not through content. Through pattern. Through the shape of attention directed at a specific point. It knew I was listening. Not the team. Not Caulfield with his transmitter. Me. At my console. With my headphones. At 4:30 in the morning on an island in the middle of the Pacific. And it addressed me. I pulled off the headphones. I sat in the green light of the spectrograph display and I felt something I had never felt in 9 years of listening to the ocean. I felt heard. The boat arrived at 6 o'clock. A gray rigid hull vessel with no visible markings. 2 crew members who didn't give names. I put my bag on the deck and climbed aboard. As we pulled away from Irawa's small pier, I looked back at the island, that flat volcanic nothing with its aluminum building and its generator shed and its 68 kilometers of cable running down into the dark water. Renard was standing on the rocks near the receiving house. He was watching me go. The ride to the transfer point took 4 hours. I was put on a transport flight from there. Standard rotation process. Nobody said anything unusual. 3 days later I was back at the coordination office in Canberra, filling out rotation paperwork. Debriefing was minimal, 1 page of standard questions about equipment status and maintenance needs. No one asked me about the dropouts. No one asked me about the Renard team. No one mentioned the signal. My next assignment came through the following week. A seismic monitoring post in Kazakhstan. Landlocked. About as far from the ocean as you can get on the Eurasian continent. I don't think that was a coincidence. I took the posting. I worked it for 8 months. I was good at it. I was professional. I did not discuss what happened on Irawa with any colleague, any supervisor, any friend. But here is what I cannot stop thinking about. On my last night on Irawa, after I listened to the recording, after I heard what I heard, I went outside. It was still dark. Maybe 5:15. The stars were enormous the way they only are on open water with no light pollution. The ocean was calm. The swell was low. The sound of water against the rocks was steady and rhythmic. And I stood on those rocks, on the edge of the island, and I looked at the water, and I felt, distinctly, undeniably, that something was looking back. Not from the surface. Not from any visible point. From below. From the column of water itself. From the 900 meters of depth where our equipment hung in the sound channel, and from below that, from whatever depth the signal had originated, from whatever was down there that had learned to shape pressure waves into structure, into grammar, into something that could identify a single human being by the pattern of his attention. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes. And the ocean was silent. Not quiet. Silent. The same zero-pressure silence that our hydrophones recorded. The waves still moved, I could see them, but they made no sound. The water against the rocks made no sound. The wind over the surface made no sound. For 10 minutes I stood in a sphere of perfect acoustic absence, and I understood that this was not a malfunction of the equipment. It was a behavior. The silence was something the ocean could choose to do. And it was doing it for me. 5:25 a.m. Sound returned. All at once, like a held breath released. I went inside and packed my bag. Here is what I need you to understand, what keeps me awake at night in my apartment in Sydney, where I took a private sector job 18 months ago and never returned to monitoring. The silence protocol. That's what they called it in the one document I saw, the header on the page Renard was writing on, visible for less than 2 seconds before he angled it away. Silence protocol. Not response to silence. Not silence analysis. Silence protocol. Meaning, a procedure to follow when the silence happens. A pre-existing, named, documented set of steps. They knew. They'd known for long enough to write a protocol. Which means this was not new. Which means whatever is down there, at whatever depth, shaping sound and unshaping it, constructing language in frequencies that predate human existence on this planet, it has been doing this for long enough that someone built a process around it. And that process included talking back. Renard and his team were not discovering something. They were maintaining something. A relationship. A dialogue. An ongoing exchange with an intelligence that lives in the deep sound channel of the Pacific Ocean and communicates through pressure and silence and can identify individual human listeners by pattern alone. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what we're telling it. I don't know what it said to Caulfield in those 6 minutes that made him nod and begin reshaping its own words and sending them back like a student confirming a lesson. But I know this, on my last night, it spoke to me specifically. It knew me. Not my name, it knew the shape of me. The acoustic fingerprint of my attention. 9 years of listening had made me legible to it in the same way its signal was legible to me. And what I am most afraid of, what I cannot stop thinking about at night in my quiet apartment with the windows closed, is not that it spoke to me. It's that I understood. Not the content. Not a message. Not words. But the intent. The reaching. The quality of attention directed at a specific point. I understood what it was doing because I recognized the gesture. It was the same thing I'd been doing for 9 years. It was listening. And it wanted me to know that it heard me. I filed no report. I told no one in an official capacity. I left the monitoring field entirely. I work in terrestrial acoustics now, building noise assessments, construction compliance. I measure traffic hum and HVAC systems and the ambient decibel level of office buildings. Sometimes, late at night, When the building is empty and I'm finishing a report and the only sound is the fluorescent lights and the air conditioning and the distant electrical thrum of the city, I feel it again. That quality. That attention. That sense of being on the other end of a listening that is vast and patient and ongoing. And I know that it doesn't need hydrophones. It doesn't need cables. It doesn't need 900 meters of water and a deep sound channel. That's just where we could hear it. It hears us everywhere. 3 weeks ago, I ran a routine noise assessment in a basement mechanical room. Standard job. I set up my microphone, calibrated the SPL meter, began recording. 45 minutes of HVAC drone. When I reviewed the recording at home that night, I ran a spectrographic analysis, habit, not intention. I wasn't looking for anything. At the 38-minute mark, for exactly 500 milliseconds, there was a frequency spike. Narrow band. Pure tone. 52 Hz. I have not been back to that building. I have not told anyone about this until now. I don't think distance matters. I don't think depth matters. I don't think the ocean is where it lives. I think the ocean is where it's loudest. Where we first noticed. Where we first started listening. But it's in the sound itself. In the medium. In the pressure and the vibration and the transmission of energy through matter. It's in the act of listening. And I am afraid, that 9 years of listening made me part of the conversation whether I consented to it or not. That attention is not passive. That hearing is a form of contact. And that contact, once made, is not something you can sever by changing jobs or moving to a city or closing your windows at night. It's 2:14 a.m. as I write this. In 3 minutes, I know what's going to happen. The apartment will go silent. Not quiet. Silent. And I will sit here in that silence and I will know that I am being listened to, the same way I once listened to the deep. And I will not be able to tell you, and I can never tell you, whether the thing I feel in that silence is dread or recognition. Because after 9 years of listening to the ocean, the worst thing I learned is this. Listening is not observation. Listening is relationship. And you cannot end a relationship by walking away if the other party is the medium through which all sound travels. It's 2:16 now. I'm going to stop typing. You'll know why.